Hello everyone, welcome to the special series of podcasts from the Reporters Collective. I'm your host Pawan. In this three-part series, we'll be exploring how government's environmental policies are shaping up the ecologically sensitive areas, with the monsoon season triggering floods and landslides in Kerala, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. We feel that this is a timely discussion. Our series is based on investigative reports by the Reporters Collective. We will start the series by discussing the river mining in Gaula River in Uttarakhand. River mining is an essential activity that involves extracting materials like sand, stones, gravel from the river beds. These resources are crucial for construction and infrastructure development across India, used in everything from building roads to bridges. However, the methods and scale of these extractions have sparked concerns about the environmental impact on river ecosystems and surrounding communities. We will discuss this based on a couple of reports by the Reporters Collective journalist. Joining us today is Tapasya, the lead investigative reporter who has extensively covered river mining in both Jammu and Uttarakhand. With her experience in environmental journalism, Tapasya will provide us valuable insight into the impact of these activities on local ecosystems. Tapasya, before we start discussing the actual details of it, on this Gaula River, there has been mining. Like, how did you end up finding that something is happening?
So, most of the work in that story is based on documents, and there are documents in public domain. For example, when an approval is sought for doing any non-forest activity in a forest area, the agency that is doing that development or whatever, it's supposed to take an approval of the central government, and papers are put online. So that is one way through which we get to know what has gotten approval.
When we were preparing for the podcast, I was speaking to Nitin. He said, this work we do is basically passing through thousands of documents and then figuring out what is wrong. Right. But how do you end up at a certain document?
So that depends from story to story. In the Uttarakhand story about how the state government flouted norms, center flouted norms to allow river mining, that thing was in the local media in Uttarakhand for quite some time. And we did get leads from people saying, look, a chief minister is going out to the union government and asking for permission, and also permissions that should not be given, because there is no compliance of environmental norms in these cases. We also see reports on social media, etc. And then there are some things that really stand out. Like in this case, a chief minister himself going to meet the union environment minister, asking for permissions to mine rivers, extension of permissions to mine rivers, at a time when he should be actually thinking about how to prevent disasters, since monsoon was just going to come.
So one of the key dates mentioned in your article is that February 18, 2023. Just to give the context, what happens is in 2013, if you can go and give sure. Context regarding
So, in Uttarakhand, there is a state body called the Uttarakhand Forest Development Corporation that does river mining in forest areas. If there's a river in forest areas, they do it. On paper, it is to prevent flooding. So they will mine out the river. They will extract sand, gravel, stones from the middle of the river to prevent floods. So this body got an approval to mine rivers in Uttarakhand forest areas in 2013. So that is when it got the permission to start mining Gaula River also, on which the story is based. And that approval was for 10 years. It was supposed to end in, I think, January 2023. And that is when the state government went out and got a temporary work permit to continue the mining.
One thing is, like, you're saying that the river is mined to prevent floods?
Yeah. So the idea is that you remove the material from the center of the river, so the flow comes to the center.
Okay, but otherwise the material which is removed is also used for constructions.
Yeah. So the material that is removed, UKFDC does the mining and it is sold off.
Okay.
So private players will buy that and they will pay a royalty based on the quantity of the material that they have got. Just to give something that makes it more clear, patch in a forest area is mined. You get whatever sand, gravel, stones. For example, a private player's truck comes in, it is weighed when it is empty. It comes in, it takes the material, it is weighed again on its way out to see how much material they are now carrying out. And on that, royalty is charged.
10 years of license to do this, basically.
Yeah.
to do this,
Earn their revenue.
Yeah. And also make sure that they follow all the regulations around it.
Yeah, they are supposed to.
They're supposed to.
They're
Right.
supposed to.
What they is that now in February 2023, the chief minister goes to union minister asking for an extension.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
At the time, one of the things you mentioned is that they first get a temporary extension. Is there any reason for that, or it's just a general?
So if the process of applying for an extension is not complete, then there is a way to just give a temporary approval. But even while giving a temporary approval, you have to ensure that this particular agency, this particular whatever company has not been non-compliant.
This is something which the union government has to check.
It is not only at the time of giving an approval, right? You have to keep checking that all the time. But if you are giving an extension for 5 years or however many years, you have to make sure that you give it only if there is no point in having the law, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things which also mentioned. I think you spoke to one of the experts or lawyers, if I'm not wrong, wherein they say that the laws are there, but it's as good as not having them.
If I remember correctly, Kanchi Kohli, legal researcher, she said that these laws have become more of a negotiating tool and are given at discretion. Clearances are given at discretion. Yeah.
So union government has to make sure that compliance is followed. The state government themselves also have to make sure that they follow the compliance, and the body which is mining has to follow. Basically, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But yes, they have to do it.
Before we continue the rest of the episode, we want to take a moment to highlight the work we do at the Reporters Collective. The Reporters Collective is dedicated to in-depth independent journalism that brings crucial public interest stories to light. Investigative reporting like Tapasyas, which we are discussing, requires significant time and resource to produce, and even more to transform them into podcasts. If you value this work, please consider supporting the collective. A link for donation will be provided along with the podcast.
What happens in this case is that they ask for an extension, and one of the things they also do is that they ask for extension in February. They get a month, I think, till February 28th.
I think January, it was ending in January, so they get an extension till February
28th.
Yeah.
Right. And in January, Chief Minister goes and meets the union regarding this extension. He then posts on Facebook saying that he has met the union government and got the approval.
I think that's after the temporary work permit it was going to end. Pushkar Singh Dhami himself went. I don't know why he felt the need to go himself. Maybe because it was difficult to get the approval or whatever. Also because Pushkar Singh Dhami, Uttarakhand Chief Minister, also has the mining portfolio in the state. There was a sense of pride that I am going and I have got center's approval to mine the river, which will generate revenue for the state, which is good for the state. So there is pride in doing that mining activity. Feb end he went, or March beginning, and in 5 days the center gave approval without really checking.
Yeah, without checking. And also one of the things the Facebook post says that double engine sarkar.
It's so ironical that double engine sarkar is being used to just say, oh, we've gone out and now we'll do full-on extraction.
Don't care about any of the laws or regulations and we'll just destroy the river. So one of the things also mentioned is that Gaula River has had flash floods before. There were a couple of bridge collapses.
In 2021. There has been previous reporting also, good reporting from Gaula of how norms are not followed. There are a lot of things that you need to keep in mind and how many of those regulations were being flouted. People's agricultural lands got submerged in the area. So there was a loss of livelihood as well. How bridge collapsed, Gaula River. Even if right now you go there, everybody will mention this in floods, bridge collapsed. And that has happened, and it is one of the most mined rivers, as I have been told, in Uttarakhand, and a lot of illegal mining happens on Gaula.
So Gaula River specifically is what you have investigated.
Yeah.
But one of the things is also that union government actually has flagged a lot of issues. Is it union government or it is a body?
No, it's union governments. In the union government, there's a committee that checks these proposals, and then it stipulates conditions that you need to follow. Basically recommends.
It's
the
a
project.
recommendation body in a way,
Yeah,
say that
yeah.
this is what is happening, and the union government should take call based on that.
Yeah, it recommends project, and in this case it did recommend. It said it should be given an approval, even though it had flagged a lot of issues. Compensatory afforestation was not complete. There were some structures that were there. So whenever you divert a forest land for non-forest purpose, you have to have an equal area of land, forestation in an equal area of land. This is called compensatory afforestation. You compensate for the forests that you have lost. But in most of the cases, this compensatory afforestation is just a hollow term. And in this case also, they found that compensatory afforestation was not done. There were some structures inside that area, compensatory afforestation area. Even after all of these issues were noted down, they got the approval. One important thing that also came up in this process of giving them an extension of 5 years was that union government said that all the sale proceeds should go for forest conservation.
Yes.
But Uttarakhand government has passed an order which is contrary to that, and it should withdraw that order. We'll come to that later, because that is the basis of the second story on Gaula River.
Yes. Apart from doing all this, they have done other things also. They were mining in June during the monsoon season.
Yeah. So after they got the approval in March, I think, they're supposed to mine only till May 31st. October to May 31.
June to October, they should not mine.
Yeah, they should
October
not
to May,
mine.
they can mine.
Yeah, that is monsoon months. You should not mine in the river. It can change the course of the river and cause unprecedented damage if in case of floods. So there are guidelines, sand mining guidelines, which clearly state कि ये नहीं होना चाहिए. Even in the approval that they got, it is clearly mentioned that mining should be restricted to these months. But again, the Uttarakhand government went ahead and asked the center, let us mine in June as well. In public, the government gave the excuse that this will generate 50 crore revenue for the government. Basically, it has all become an extraction thing, right? When you say 50 crore revenue, but you're not taking into consideration how economy will be impacted by the devastation, how livelihoods will be impacted. You're just how much the state is getting, right?
Very narrow view of we want to extract materials from here and get the money from that.
Yeah, there's no evidence for it, but if you allow mining in an area, all of the mining that happens is not legal. So it is also connected to a lot of other things.
Just checking the notes, and there are small regulations like how much of the river should be mined is also part of the regulations.
There are reports that they were not following it. In this case, when they were seeking an extension to mine, so they're supposed to mine in the middle half of the river and leave 1/4 on either side, on the banks. But they had asked, I think, for extending that 50% in the center, say 70 kar dijiye.
And the rest should be on the banks. But now they have increased it.
Yeah.
Basically, what they're doing is the flow of...
I don't think the center agreed to that.
But that might be happening.
On ground, you have no idea what is happening. What is on paper is on paper. Even the regulations at central level, state level are not being followed. How are you saying that on the ground they are being followed, right? If they are not being followed on paper, we all know what would be happening.
Yeah, that's anyway the difference is
nobody is going
also.
there.
Even if all the regulations are followed on paper, on ground it might be completely, or at least slightly different than what they're saying. Yeah, it shows that last year when you wrote this, they got the permission, and since then they have been mining.
Yeah.
But there's also the other things that the private players are involved. The mining generally is done by the, if I'm not wrong, the Forest Commission,
Development
Corporation, right?
Yeah.
They do it, but private players are also involved in mining, right?
They get the mined material, they pay royalty for it, and then they sell it at much higher rates in the market outside and earn profit from it. Yeah.
Okay, you're coming to the second piece, on this particular river itself, the second piece is what? State contractors. The first one was called bleed.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering where to start. Right? Bleed was much easier to first figure out what all regulations the governments have flouted. Then coming to what the private players are doing. So one of the thing is tax collection. From what I understand, you can correct me. The way it works is that from where the mining is done, from there to when the trucks are going, in between there are checks where the private checkposts where the private player has to pay.
Yeah.
that particular check post is done by the government or it's being handled by the private players?
So it was being done by the government, but now they given it to a private company. So a private company will be collecting revenue and taxes on the sale of the mined material. In the story also, we talk about how problematic that is, because illegal mining is when royalty is not collected on mined material. You just take it without giving royalty on it, without following rules and regulations. Now you're giving a private company the responsibility of checking that. You are in effect asking a private company to become a law enforcement arm of the government. The thing that is usually done by the government itself, control, monitor illegal mining, that a private company is doing. And what is even more surprising is that this private company will also be given priority to mine in available mining areas. So if there is a mining lease that can be given out, this company will be given priority to mine.
So for example, there are three companies, let's say, just giving an example in my head, trying to understand this. Is that particular company which is a check post trying to collect the royalty, they themselves are one of the three companies, right?
They can get that.
Yeah, they can get that. So it becomes like
it's a conflict of interest. Clear conflict of interest.
Basically, they are not there to make sure that it is going properly or how much of that material is being properly taken. All that.
A mining company's motive is to get profit from mining.
Yes.
And a mining company, you're asking a mining company to check whether mining is happening properly or not.
So you are completely giving away the responsibility.
You're outsourcing your responsibility. Law enforcement, you're outsourcing. A very interesting thing that a lawyer said in this piece, Dushyant Benali, he is an environment lawyer based in Haldwani. He said it's like outsourcing a police station. Very interesting. You have outsourced. This was done according to rules. This has been brought in the rules. It's not like they have flouted a rule.
So the private players are not flouting the rules technically.
Uttarakhand government made new rules. It amended rules to bring in provisions that will allow this.
So that's even worse.
That is how it happens. It's always the loopholes in laws that state brings or central government brings that allow these things to happen.
What is the net present value which I have seen twice mentioned in there? What exactly is that?
So before I jump into that, we'll give a little context to listeners also. So whenever you're diverting forest land for non-forest purpose, there is a certain ecological value that forest
area.
Just to compensate for that value, the entity that is going to use that or raise that forest will reimburse, it will give that net present value, that amount, which will be used for forest
conservation basically.
So basically it was thought of as a deterrent. If you are going to cut very densely forested patch, then the net present value will increase.
Basically, it's supposed to make private players which are bidding for this to be aware that they have to pay a lot of money to do what the work, so they not do it.
Probably if it is a very dense, it sounds very extractive, it's very ecologically very valuable forest, they will move to something that is not as much
or not as sensitive.
From a densely forested patch, they might move to a degraded forest land or maybe a non-forest land to do that activity.
That is the idea. Idea behind it. But what happens is that for the NPV, the net present value, which is that value is less.
In this case, in the case of mining in forest areas, which Uttarakhand Forest Development Corporation gives, they're exempted from paying this net present value.
They don't pay anything. It's not even like they're paying less.
They do not pay net present value, and it is through a Supreme Court order which sort of mandated what net present value will be given. They also exempted certain projects, certain activities from this, and one of them is river mining in forest areas. If it is done outside national park sanctuaries, if it is done by a government body, if all the sale proceeds that come from this mining, sale of boulder stones, are used for forest conservation. So these are conditions.
Conditions, yeah.
In this case, Uttarakhand Forest Development Corporation is doing it and saying it that it's using the sale proceeds for forest conservation. But in the beginning of the podcast, I said that the central government had flagged this and they had said that
it's not being done properly.
Yeah, you're not using sale proceeds for forest conservation according to Supreme Court's orders.
Going back to that initial permission, basically what happens is that the union government, the body which union government has...
Their recommendation committee, we can call it, forest advisory. Yeah.
They say that you have not done it. So technically they shouldn't be getting the permission. Or at least there should be some kind of recommendation which says that you cannot get the approval of extension of that license in say for 5 years immediately. So there should be something being done like that, right?
That is how, hollow these laws actually become. When the union government is saying that it is just restricting itself to one order of Uttarakhand government. So if they were giving the approval in March, they're saying that in January, Uttarakhand government has passed an order and that order should be withdrawn. Now, Uttarakhand government had passed an order in which it sort of reduced the amount given by a private player to the government when it buys this mined material. And the central government said the sale proceeds should go entirely. They use the word entirely. They should go entirely for forest conservation. So Uttarakhand government should immediately withdraw this order. This is one of the conditions of approval. It means that the approval that you have given is based on following this condition.
Yes.
But that did not happen.
That did not happen, And in fact, the forest department doesn't also get the whole money. They get fraction.
That is the problem. The forest department and the forest authority that mines, they in all get around 55 to 58% of the sale proceeds. Rest of it goes to the state's coffers. They get this much only. And this is from 4 different rivers. Because in the second story, I'm not just talking about Gaula. I'm talking about Kosi, Dabka, these rivers also. That is what the Uttarakhand government had been doing, that it was not using all of this for forest conservation, all of this, the sale proceeds for forest conservation. It was giving the forest department and the forest body only around 55%. And even after the central government said this on paper, while giving them the approval, they did not withdraw the order. It still happened like
it was happening before this.
It's a violation of a Supreme Court order. Supreme Court has said that you can do it only if you're utilizing the entire sale proceeds for forest conservation. You're not doing that. So basically you're violating the Supreme Court orders. You are also not really adhering to what the center has said. And in this also, one also has to see what is the center doing? What compliance is it checking? What is the purpose of all of these laws if one of the norms mandated by the Supreme Court is not being followed?
They're not there.
It
doesn't matter.
It feels like it has become so normalized. I had also done a story in 2021. It was about Vedanta's plant in Goa. There were, I think, 30 violations, non-compliances that they found, but still granted an approval. So, I don't know.
Coming back to this, because I want to make sure that we cover as much as we can. But one of the things is that there's also the small miners, something.
When I was in Haldwani, I spoke to.
Were the rivers when you were dry?
It was dry.
It was not monsoon. It was before monsoon.
The same month that the story is published, it was completely dry, and I spoke to people who are involved in this, transporters, porters who.
Daily wage laborers kind of thing?
Daily wage laborers are also there who take the
seeds
sand and some of them just store it, some sell it, chota mota, but that's also there. But coming back to the point that they gave the responsibility of collecting royalty to a private player, you're giving it to a private player. And that private player is a competitor of other private players, right? Yes. Who are coming there to take the material. You can't think of a private player as somebody who is very unbiased and
ethical.
That there won't be any collusion with maybe another private player to run over
the other smaller
specific,
ones. There's no level playing field, is what you're saying.
If you're giving it to private company and other private players are doing it, then bigger private company will take it and the smaller fish will die, as happens in such cases. One other important thing was that the truckers, the transporters who take this material from one place to the stone crushers, many of these are small local players also. In another order, what the Uttarakhand government did was that it increased the quantity that one truck can take at one time. When you do that, these smaller transporters, they have trucks that they have been using. They can't really burden their trucks. I mean, they have to really take care. If they take too much, their trucks will fall apart. And on the other hand, if there is a big player, they can buy a really...
they can easily invest and make sure that they can completely remove the smaller players.
Yeah, exactly.
While destroying that particular ecosystem far more than the smaller ones can. Probably the smaller ones can be forced to follow the regulations, although they also don't follow. But I'm just saying that there is some. But the bigger the player, the less of these things being strictly followed.
There are whole areas, communities that are dependent on money, have been doing mining, their transporters, or have in some way depended on Gaula River traditionally also. So those people are getting washed away with this commercialization, big corporates entering the scene.
That's all from this episode. What we see is that both state and central governments have repeatedly bypassed environmental laws to prioritize resource extraction. The profits in the short terms have an impact on the long-term sustainability of the local ecosystems. While we focused on an issue from Uttarakhand, it is far from isolated. In the next episode, we'll start with how Uttarakhand government responded to some of the critical questions asked by Reporters Collective and explore a similar situation which has unfolded in Jammu. We will also discuss the centre's pivotal role in enabling such situations at local levels. See you in the next episode.